So let's start with some tips how you can prepare for your exam. Now you have a break. Definitely you will take some time to refresh and relax after your assignments and after the busy term. But later on you will start with your exam preparation. So first of all, you need to, those are all my suggestions, by the way. You can follow any approach as you wish. But these are some tips that I can give you by considering the previous years and previous students we have. So first thing you can do is to develop a study plan. So you have all lecture material, you have the slides, you have recordings, both synchronous and asynchronous part. So prepare a list of the topics that you are going to cover, that can be covered in the exam, that you are responsible for. And then organize your material for review. So as I mentioned, there are lots of material right now. You have synchronous presentations. At the same time, you have asynchronous presentations. You have your course book. So you need to organize your material so that later on when you study, you don't miss any point. You are both responsible from the synchronous and asynchronous parts. And also, in the meantime, while you are working on your study materials, you can also practice. So what do I mean? We have some questions during the lectures with the poll, you may remember. You can also focus on the questions we discussed during seminar. By the way, you are not going to be you are not going to implement any R code or any software R programming part, but the main picture. So how we decide which evaluation technique to use, for instance, depending on the problem, you decide which one to use to evaluate your model. So don't on the R part, but on the questions we discussed during the seminars or during the lectures. So we have one question from Ronlin. Where can we find the asynchronous videos? Those are all in my WBS in the tasks part. You can check from there, and also I will also give you some tips for the visualization part. In visualization, you don't have directly the recorded videos, but in your slides, there are some links that you can reach those videos. And one question from Xiang, for those who have face-to-face seminar, can we have recordings of those face-to-face seminar? Yeah, definitely. I release all of the recordings in the seminar, our workshop study materials. So you can watch the recordings from there as well if you had face-to-face seminar. Okay, so first of all, my suggestion for you to develop a study plan so that you know which topics you are going to study for the exam. Then organize your material, presentations, you can watch the videos again, course book, the related part, or if you have any additional material from visualization, you can also organize those materials to study. Then you should definitely practice. So while you are studying, it's important to understand the main idea. So what is a confusion matrix? Why we are using it? Okay. So what you can do, you can focus on the questions we discuss and try to understand the main idea of the topics. But now I'm going to summarize what we had done in the past weeks. In the first 6 weeks, we focus on the data mining process. So we mainly follow the steps in CRISP-DM methodology. You may remember it. We have 6 stages: business understanding, data preparation, modeling, evaluation, and deployment. In the first lecture, we start with business understanding, and during our implementations in R, we also discuss this stage briefly. Then we focus on data understanding. We describe the main stages in the first lecture, what we do in data understanding stage, and mainly in the next lectures, we focus on data preparation, modeling, and evaluation. So in the data preparation part, you may remember we focus on 4 main topics: data cleaning. So we discuss missing values, incorrect entries, outliers, how to handle these. But as I mentioned, you are not going to be evaluated on the R programming part. What can you do in the data cleaning stage? You can focus on, for instance, you can investigate why we are treating missing values. So when we remove missing values, or when we replace them with the average values or with another values we can read from the data. For instance, you can have a case in your exam let's say there's a data set with lots of missing values, and you can be asked how to treat this, whether it is better to remove the missing values and why in that case, or whether it is better to replace them with the meaningful observations we can obtain from the data. Okay, so you are not going to be asked on how to write down the R code to treat missing values, but which type of approach you can follow when you have a specific case. After data cleaning, we discussed data sampling. As you may remember, random sampling and stratified sampling we mainly focused on, and we discussed the advantages and disadvantages of random sampling mainly. Again, you don't need to know the R code, but you should know how we do random sampling. When we do it, we don't check any records. We do it randomly. Therefore, if we apply random sampling to the highly imbalanced data set, we may not represent the minority class. Again, you can have a case in your exam, for instance, with a highly imbalanced data set, and you can be asked which type of sampling to apply in this specific case. Therefore, it's important to know the main idea of these methods. Later on, we discussed data partitioning. So we learn how to partition our data into training and test sets. And the main idea, as you may remember in this case, we want our test set to reflect the real application. So what do I mean? The entire population. Therefore, we do this partitioning step before applying any oversampling or data balancing techniques, or before applying anything which may change our overall data set, our test design. So these are the main ideas that you can pick in these specific topics. So when we apply data partitioning, why data partitioning is important, and why we are doing it. Okay? So these are the things that you can focus on while you are studying the material. One question from Arun: can you discuss these steps in the context of our assignment? Today I'm not going to focus on the assignment, since assignment will be marked later on. Therefore, it may not be appropriate to discuss it, but I will give you some examples from each case while discussing these steps. Okay? And later on, yeah, as an example, definitely I can discuss it. And later on, we discuss data balancing. What is the main idea in data balancing? To represent the minority class in our data set. So while we have this data imbalance issue, when we have a, let's say, if you consider binary classification case as in your assignment, we have two classes. One class is minority. It's very rarely represented in the entire data set, and we have a majority. So why data balancing is important? If we use that data set as it is, the classifiers, the machine learning models, is going to focus on the majority. And the reason is their overall aim when we set up the model is to increase accuracy or decrease the error rate. Therefore, if we give a highly imbalanced data set to our classifier, it will focus on the majority, but our main aim is to identify the minority class. This can be, for instance, example from the fraud case, fraudulent versus legitimate transactions. We would like to identify the fraudulent transactions. Therefore, we would like to represent that minority class more in our data set. How we can do this? There are different techniques. We learn mainly undersampling and oversampling. In oversampling, we copy the instances from the minority class. We don't add any new information. We just copy the instances from minority class to increase their representation in the in our training data. The other technique is undersampling. What we do in undersampling, we remove records from the majority class, again, in order to increase the representation of the minority class in our training data. So when we apply which technique, we can use undersampling mainly when we have a large data set. What do I mean? If while removing data from our entire data set, we don't lose any important information. If you have a really big data set, you can directly use undersampling. If your data set is very small, oversampling can be a better technique. But you should always check the effect on the model. So in some cases, even you have a large data set, with undersampling you may remove important information. Therefore, it's always better to have a safe check to check the effect on the model. So important part in data balancing is to know when to apply it. You need to apply it to only training data. As I mentioned before, we don't want to change the distribution in our test data set. Test data set should represent the entire population. Okay, so in your exam, again, you don't going to have a question regarding to R code, but you may be asked when to apply data balancing, or you can be given a case where balancing applied before data partitioning. Then you can be asked whether this is an appropriate approach. If it is not, why, and then explain. Okay. So always focus on the main idea, why we apply these techniques, and what is the reason, how we can improve the performance of our model, or what is our main aim by applying these techniques. In the data preparation, we mainly focus on these four. And then one question from Yunkay, what about both sampling? Yeah, we see that in R, we can apply both of them at the same time. And what is your question in this case? Again, you can discuss, let's say, assume that you're given a case and ask which technique to apply, oversampling, undersampling, or both of them. You can discuss which one to use and then discuss why you are selecting that particular method. One question from Kakanan, how can we check the effect after balancing? So you can check the effect with the evaluation techniques. After you balance your data, you can use that data in a particular model and then check how the performance of your model affected. Let's say if you can use oversampling first and then undersampling and check how the not accuracy, in that particular case your focus is on the minority class, you can check how the recall, if the true positive rate is important in that specific case, you can check how recall is affected. Then we move to modeling stage. In modeling stage, we start with the description of general models we have, predictive models and descriptive models. They are also known as supervised learning and unsupervised learning. And after that, we focus on information gain. And information gain also helps us to understand the logic of decision trees. So what we do in decision trees, we identify the important features, and by using those features, we generate our set of rules. So we learn how to apply information gain with the entropy function, and then we focus on modeling techniques like decision tree, SVM, and logistic regression. And later on, we focus on the overfitting problem. So in this particular area in modeling, definitely you should learn how to calculate information gain. I'm not saying that it is an exam in the question or not. I can't give any tips on that. But since we learn how to calculate this, you need to know the formulation, and also you need to know the idea. Your exam is open book. Definitely you can check the formulation later on, but you should learn the main idea in information gain. So why we are doing information gain? We identify the important features, and how we identify those, we check the decrease in entropy. Decrease in entropy means decrease in disorderness level. So our overall idea with information gain is to identify the features which may help us to identify the target value, either fraud or not fraud. Okay? Either this customer made a transaction or not. So this is the main idea. Not only knowing the formulation helps, but you need to also know the logic of information gain. We would like to identify the features which will decrease the disorderness, and the decreasing disorderness, we can make better predictions about the target variable. So in this particular part, you can focus on information gain, and then you can review the models we discussed. You don't know the, you shouldn't, but you are not required to know every details about the models, but the main idea. So what we do in decision tree, we split our data set into smaller subsets. And with these subsets, actually, in order to define those, we use the features which will help us to define the rules about our data set. And we try to make a prediction. So decision trees are very Nice methods, since we can directly interpret the rules. So you can represent your decision tree model to the managers who doesn't know anything about, let's say, data mining or machine learning. They can directly see the rules, and you can represent your model in a more meaningful way. So decision trees are interpretable. Later on, we discuss linear separation methods like SVM, logistic regression, linear discriminant functions, and in that particular case, our main idea is to find the best separating plane so that we can identify the target variable. So just focus on the slides in the lecture that when we discuss these models, and this will give you enough information if you have a question in the exam about these models. And we also focus on overfitting. We actually discuss it in the evaluation stage later on, but I put it in this part, so I'm going to discuss it briefly in here. You may remember when overfitting happens, when our model is tailored to the training data set. So we use our, why this is happening, so you can have a question why overfitting is happening. This happens during the modeling stage. So our model can learn from our training data and can predict the training data exactly, but this doesn't mean it's going to work well on the test data. So you can generate a model by using all of the features, but then in this particular case, your model will be complex. Since you use all of those features, it will be a large model. It can predict everything in the training data, but it doesn't mean it's going to work well on the test data. How we identify overfitting? We can compare our evaluation results on the training set and test sets. After some point, as we add more features to our data set, after some point, all the training performance improves, test performance starts to decrease. And that shows your model starts to overfit. So you can compare your test and training results to identify overfitting. And when you have overfitting problem, what can you do? You can remove features, unnecessary features from your data. How you can identify these unnecessary features? You can apply information gain, Gini coefficients, or other techniques to identify important features. And after identifying those, you can remove non-important ones, which doesn't have any effect on the target people. In some cases, overfitting happens due to the insufficient information in your training set. So what do I mean? You built your model on the training set, later on you test it on the test data. Training set may not include every possible instances, every instance we can see in the test data. Therefore, when you have this insufficient information in your training data, your model starts to overfit. It doesn't predict the cases which is new, which happens only on the test data. If you have such a case, what you can do, you can increase the size of your training data, and the best way is actually to obtain more information. You can go back to your data understanding stage, collect more data to provide more variety to your training data set. In the decision trees, we can remove features or we can prune the tree. This will also decrease the complexity of our model. And in this way, we can also prevent overfitting. So there are several techniques. Those are described in the lecture slides. You can check those, and this will help you to cover this particular area. And later on, after this part, we focus on evaluation. And we discuss several techniques, but we start with the accuracy. So first of all, you may remember we evaluate. It is, if I'm not mistaken, in week 4 workshop, we evaluate models by using the accuracy. But later on, we discussed that accuracy is not always a good measure, especially when the target variable, the outputs of the target variable, classes of the target variable has different weights. So what do I mean? If you consider your assignment, in the assignment, we would like to predict the customers who will make a specific transaction. So the target variable has 1 and 0s. Our focus is on the ones, so on the customers who are going to make that specific transaction. So in that case, accuracy is not a good metric, since when we use accuracy, it evaluates both of the outcomes with the same weight. exactly calculates the correct predictions, overall correct predictions, both true positives and true negatives, divided by overall test records. When we have these different weights, instead of accuracy, we can use different things that we can learn from our confusion matrix. So what we have in our confusion matrix, true positives, true negatives, false positives, and false negatives. These are the names, the parametric names, but you should know what true positive means. So true positives is our correct positive predictions. Is our correct main focus predictions. True negatives, on the other hand, is our correct negative predictions. False positives, this is also known as type 1 error. We predicted as a positive outcome. We predicted, let's say, this is a fraudulent transaction, but it wasn't. So this is called type 1 error, false positives, and we have false negatives, which is type 2 errors. We predicted as a legitimate transaction, but this was a fraudulent transaction. So there are 4 elements in our confusion matrix. It's very important to know what are those. And by using these 4 elements, we can also obtain different measures like recall, true positive rate, which is also known as a record or sensitivity. We have precision, we have true negative rate, we have false positive rate. So there are different rates that we can obtain from our confusion matrix. And instead of accuracy, we can use some of these metrics depending on our business objectives. Again, since your exam will be open book, you will have your formulations with you, but the main important thing is to understand the logic. What is recall and when we are using it. Then we also learn that we can use prediction scores to make predictions about the target variable. So instead of directly using the predictions obtained from our model with the, let's say, if you use decision tree, it will actually use this class prediction scores to give you the output. But instead of this, we can use prediction scores and identify a threshold value to make a prediction. By default, it is set to 0.5. What do I mean? If the prediction score is greater than or equal to 0.5, it will be predicted as a positive class. Otherwise, it will be predicted as negative class with your definition. But you have the flexibility to change it. And changing this, you are going to affect your true positives, true negatives, false positives, and false negatives in your confusion matrix. And all of your recall, precision, all of your metrics is going to change. And by using these prediction scores, we can also plot important things, important evaluation measures for our model, like ROC chart, gain chart. We learn this. We learn how to plot the ROC chart. It is in your asynchronous video. We also learn how to plot gain chart. It's also in the asynchronous video part. And we learn how to use these metrics to identify the performance of the model. ROC chart shows the trade-off between true positive rate and false positive rate. On the y-axis, we have true positive rate, and that part we would like to keep high so that we identify all correct predictions or most of the correct predictions without making any mistakes. So in the ROC chart, our main focus is to check whether our model is doing well in terms of true positive rate and false positive rate, and we use this to compare several models. On the other hand, in the gain chart, we check when our model reaches all of the true positives. So if we give an example from the customer response case, with the gain chart, what we can do, we can identify the percentage of customers that we need to contact or that we need to apply a promotion to identify the correct response customers. So gain chart shows the effectiveness of our model when we will be able to reach all of the positive predictions. We later on also discuss expected value measure. An expected value measure helps us to show the benefit of our model. It's generally used to show using a model how you can increase your profits or what is your expected profit by using that specific model. And mainly you can use this technique to show the benefit of your model to the, let's say, managers or to your clients. So we discuss these techniques, And as I mentioned, the formulations will be all available during your exam, but you should focus on what is the main idea, how you can, for instance, calculate the confusion matrix, or when to use recall, or when to use accuracy. So here I have examples from the past exam paper. This is available on my WBS. I don't know whether you check it, but there's an explanation over there. So in the past years, the lectures were different and also some of the topics were different. Therefore, we don't release the answers to these questions. Since within the question, there can be several parts which haven't been discussed in the class. While checking your exam paper, just focus on the structure. For instance, your exam will be 1.5 hours. You will have in total 90 minutes. And as in the past exam paper, you expect to have 3 questions with several parts. You can use this sample exam paper to see the type of questions asked in the past and what type of questions you may receive in this particular year. So today I'm not going to solve these exam questions, but I will give you some tips. While in your exam, you can miss some important points which may affect your grade. And for instance, in this particular exam question, this is question 2, part B, which is related to information gain. The students asked to calculate information gain by this small data set. There are 10 instances here. And as it is given in the question, assume that we want to develop a model with 2 attributes. So the question is, which of the 2 attributes should be used for modeling? Explain your calculations and your findings. So given such a question, this question is clear. You are going to apply information gain functions, the entropy functions and all those logarithm functions, and find out the most informative 2 attributes. But there are 2 things when you read this question. First of all, from the first question, you see you need to identify 2 attributes, but later on, you see there is an explain your calculations and your findings part. That means you need to show your calculations in your exam paper. So in the past, some students directly write down the answer or didn't put any formulation. Formulation, you don't need to put down the logarithms or write down the overall formulation, but you need to show how did you calculate it. So if you directly type the answer, you will not get the full mark. Definitely, you will get penalized on this. And the second important part is to explain your findings. So what does it mean? Just typing the names, let's say here we have 3 attributes, income level, contract type, and employed. Assume that contract type and employed is the most informative ones. After your calculations, you identify the employed is the most informative one and then the contract type, let's say. Just typing down the names is not enough. You need to explain your findings. So what does it mean? Due to the information gain scores, employed has the highest one, then contract type, and then income level. We select the most informative, the highest score, the top 2, in order to identify the most informative 2 attributes. So not just showing the answer is not enough. If your question asks you to explain your findings with 1 or 2 sentences, you need to explain how you identify the most informative ones. Okay? So read your questions and try to, first of all, identify what is the expectation from you when you calculate a particular thing or when you explain a particular thing. You need to answer the exactly asked question in your exam paper. So in this particular case, after calculating the information gain scores, you need to show your calculations. And you need to also briefly, 1 or 2 sentences, you need to tell these 2 attributes should be selected since they have the highest information gain scores. One question from Arun, paper will be online or pen paper, where we need to download questions, write our answers on paper and upload. So you will have a mock exam. You will download I think the program team is going to announce a trial, exam trial. you will see how to download a paper and then type your questions or handwrite your questions and then convert it to a PDF file and upload to the specific page. So you will have one trial exam. Your exam is open book. Last year it was closed book. Due to COVID-19, this year exams are online and it's open book. Therefore, that's the main difference from the last year paper and this year paper. So you will have access to all of your notes, and I will come to that point at the end. And there is one link from Yuying. I think this is related to the mock exam or trial exam. I believe so. Okay. Again, another question from the past exam paper. Here, this is part C on the question 2. The data science team developed two models, namely Model 1 and Model 2. And in order to evaluate the performances of these models, you plotted the ROC chart, which is illustrated in this figure. Explain the ROC graph, compare the performances of Model 1 and Model 2, and advise on which model to use. So again, given this problem, for instance, after you receive this, you can directly say Model 1 is better since its line is over the green one, even they interact at some point. You can compare the areas and directly say Model 1 is doing better. And also you can, even another tip, we can check the area under curve scores to identify which model to use. But in this specific part, after comparison of the models, there's also additional question at the beginning, explain the ROC graph. For instance, most of the students last year didn't explain the ROC graph. They directly compare the models, and in such a case, you will be penalized since you haven't answered the first part. So what this ROC graph tells you, it compares the true positive rate with respect to false positive rate, and if a model is higher over the curve, let's say baseline, you can also briefly explain the baseline, it is a random chance model. If a model is over the baseline, this shows its performance is doing well. When we have more than two models, we can evaluate their performances by considering the area under curve score, which can be obtained from ROC graph. So you need to briefly explain what this ROC graph tells you. It shows the comparison between true positive rate and false positive rate for all thresholds between 0 and 1. And with this ROC chart, we can evaluate the performance of our model. Baseline is the random chance model. So give the brief descriptions which we discussed in our lectures. So the important part, you should always answer the questions asked in your exam. Okay? So given this, how you should revise? As we discussed at the beginning, please have all relevant material for each topic. The presentations, check the asynchronous and synchronous ones, and also check your notes that you've written during the lectures. And there are also some questions on the forum. This can help you to obtain additional information on a particular area. So check everything and make sure that you have all relevant material. So my suggestion for you to do a quick review, again, these are my suggestions. You can follow any approach as you wish. My suggestion for you to do a quick review of all main topics, which will help you to identify your weaknesses or, let's say, missing part you haven't understand very well. After you identify those main gaps, you can focus on these gaps. Okay? You can always discuss with your peers. It always helps to discuss with your classmates to identify or discuss a particular topic. Actually, you learn well when you are explaining a logic or explaining a particular topic to your peers. And as I mentioned, don't focus on the R code. There are no software implementation in the exam. And there's one question from Mukunda. That is my next slide. I will come to the Tableau part now. So look, unfortunately, he didn't join today, but he gave me some information to share with you. So again, for the data visualization part, there is no software implementation. You are not going to use Tableau. But as you see, there's one sample question from the past year. Although the lecturer was different, you can be asked to, let's say, evaluate a dashboard. So which particular part of dashboard is good or which particular part is bad, or you can be given a figure, lots of figures, to identify whether it is good to use those figures for that particular case. These are the things you can use your knowledge on Tableau, but again, there are some concepts which should be discussed during your lectures. Focus on those notes and focus on those concepts. You may receive such questions in your exam. So in the data visualization part, again, check your presentations, session recordings, and in the seminars, you implement some of the things with Tableau. You are not going to do any implementation, but you may discuss some particularly important information. Therefore, it's always better to check the seminar notes as well. One question from Jinkley: will some knowledge included in the textbook but not discussed in the lecture be tested? No, only the things we discussed in the lecture will be tested. So your textbook is very general. You can have different additional topics there, but you will be tested on the things we discussed in the lecture. And in your lecture notes, so Luke didn't present any or release any video recording, but he mentioned that there are some links in the lecture presentations with relevant content for further study, such as Tableau video on fundamentals of data visualization, which given as asynchronous learning. You should also check those links and watch those videos. If you have a particular question, you can definitely contact Luke to obtain more information, or you can use module forum so that everyone can see. And again, there is no software implementation in the exam. So if we consider on the tips, your exam will be open book. Definitely, this will take some pressure off from you. You don't need to memorize all of those formulations or all of those calculations we did. But during the exam, considering that you have limited time, searching for sources can be distracting and you can lose important time. Instead of writing down your answer, searching for a particular answer will definitely affect your performance. Therefore, my suggestion for you to organize your notes so that if you would like to assume that you have an information gain calculation question in the exam, you can directly go to the particular area and check the formulation and apply it in your exam. So that's very important to be organized, considering that you have an open book exam. Another thing, as I mentioned at the beginning, instead of memorizing the definition, what overfitting the formal definition, you need to learn the main logic. Or for instance, instead of memorizing what is overfitting or what is, not overfitting, oversampling, undersampling, you need to understand when we are doing it, what is the logic, why we are doing it. It always helps to learn the main ideas instead of just memorizing it. And the last part is important. Don't work all the time. I know you have 3 exams, but you should also have time to relax. Otherwise, you will be too stressed and it will unfortunately may affect your health. Therefore, please have some relaxed time and then start to work on with the fresh mind. Okay? And I think this is the end of this presentation. So thank you all. Thank you for your contribution this year. And I really enjoyed our lectures. I hope you enjoyed too. It was lovely to work with you. And I hope you learn a lot in this module. And so this is the important part actually. We are here. We will definitely have some break, 4 days or 5 days or a week at most. But you can always contact us. If we are away, you will receive a notification out of office email directly, and you will be able to see the dates we are not available. In that particular case, you can type your question to the module forum. You can always send us an email. So you know, I'm always here to help you. Just let me know, okay? And I have one announcement from Vladimir. He mentioned he couldn't have the preparation session, exam preparation session, but he and Win are available next week. If you have any questions on the optimization module, please contact Vladimir and Win next week. So they told me they are available next week. That will be great for you to discuss your questions. Thank you all. Thanks a lot. And so we have a few minutes. If you have any questions, in the meantime, I will be happy to take. There is one question from, there are lots of typings going on right now. Shiaki, analytics in practice will be a type exam, how to type functions, or we can only write the final results of the calculation. So there is one question whether exam will be typed. So we prefer to be exam to be typed, but you can, if you would like to, let's say for your formulations, if you write it down on a paper, you can take a picture and put that picture on the Word document you are typing, attach it to the Word document, and then convert it to a PDF and submit it all. So you don't need to type everything, just the main text would be typed, but otherwise you can, if there's a drawing, you can draw it. If there's a formulation, you can do it by hand, and taking a picture and attaching it would be enough. One question from Recep, can we get a zip file of all the exercises we did for our practice in the future? What do you mean by that? Do you mean the R files? Currently, the files are all over the place in the specific weeks. So do you asking have them in one particular zip file? Did I understand it correctly? Okay, yeah, I can prepare that and post it to the module page. And there are some questions from Yunkai. Will be monitored through camera during exam? I am not sure, but currently I think we don't have such a system. I think that's better to ask this to the program team, Yunkai. And one question from Pachanong, how long is our exam? Is there a timer? So your exam is 90 minutes, but you will have additional 45 minutes to convert your documents to a PDF file and submit it. So in total, 2 hours and 15 minutes. And in terms of timer, when you download your exam, the timer will start. So after that, you will have 2 hours and 15 minutes. And as Aksar mentioned, there is more in detail on MyWBS, and you will have the trial exam where you will be able to download a paper and then write something, type something, and upload it. One question from CG, the sample you mentioned before is, oops, the question just gone, just a second, yeah. The sample you mentioned before is to ask 2 attributes and explain. Do I need to use R to calculate and show the most important features? No, in the exam, you are not going to use R. You are going to use the entropy calculator. If you have such a question, you are going to use the entropy and information gain functions. You may remember those from the lecture notes. There are functions over there. You can use those to identify the information gain. And the most informative ones will have the highest score. So in that particular case, if I go back, in this particular 3 attributes, you are going to obtain a score, and the most informative 2, the highest score, top 2, will be the attributes that should be used in this particular case. And one question from Yuan Fang, what does 12-hour exam window mean? And within this exam window, so each student can download the exam at a different time, since you are located at different places all in the world. There are some students in Asia, there are some students in the UK, in Europe. Therefore, we have this 12-hour exam window. Within that window, once you download your exam, you will have 2 hours, 15 minutes, 2 hours of 15 minutes to type your exam and upload it. One question from Haran, will the open book be more difficult than usual? The questions would be different. For instance, in your usual exam, you can be asked to define a particular, let's say, what is stratified sampling or what is random sampling. So there can be definition type of questions, but with OpenBook, you can easily find out those definitions and type it down. Therefore, you don't have this directly definition or directly that you can find from your notes directly as an answer. So you won't have that type of questions in the OpenBook, but it doesn't mean it will be more difficult than usual. OpenBook exam has definitely advantages that you will have access to all of your notes, but as I mentioned, searching those notes during the exam is very distracting and it can definitely affect your performance. It's not always an advantage to have an OpenBook exam. But this doesn't mean the exam would be harder than difficult one. Any other questions? For calculation question, if we got our final answer wrong, do we still get marks for the workings? Definitely, that's the actually idea why we are asking you to show your calculations. If you just type the answer without any calculations, we wouldn't know whether you follow the correct steps. Therefore, if you show your work and if your steps are correct, you don't even get penalized on that. To calculate the information gain, do we type out calculation or is there a software to calculate? Sets question. So in order to calculate the information gain, currently I don't have those notes, but in your lectures, I think it was week 3, you have the entropy function and information gain function. You just need to put down the information you read from this data, small data, to those functions, and then calculate the information gain. If you follow the steps we did in the lecture, you will understand this particular area much better. And as I mentioned, we don't expect you to use a software in the exam. You just need to use your notes to calculate a particular part, like information gain. Will there be the content of Tableau? What Junji's question? I didn't understand your question exactly. You can, since that part is delivered by Luke, it's better to ask him. You can either post your question to the module forum or you can send him an email. Actually, this is better to put on the module forum since everyone can see it. Unfortunately, I didn't, and so it may be wrong if I reply this question. I don't want to mislead you. Any other questions? What if we want to visualize something? Let's say if you are going, are you, Sarah's question, are you asking for the data visualization part or in the overall? If you would like to draw a graph or let's say visualize something, you can do it on Excel and then take a picture and put your Word document. But as I mentioned, if in your question it's asked you to show these steps or anything, you need to add them in your document. So in Excel, if you are doing some calculations, and if you don't show these in your document, if it's asked in your question, then you may get penalized on that. It's better to write down the calculations on the paper. You can do it by hand, then take a picture, or you can do it on Word by using the formulations or equations. And for a figure, you can use Excel and put it on the Word document. Any other questions? Are there seminar recordings from Luke's sessions? I think he posted a message on this. He uploaded everything to OneDrive, if I'm not mistaken, and I think he announced or posted a message yesterday. There should be a link where you can download the seminar recordings. Okay, great, yeah, it's there. And you already know, probably you already know, we will have a Christmas party, New Year party, and I hope you can join as well. And one question from Pachano: do we need to provide references for textbooks used in the exam? You don't need to provide it, but my suggestion for you, if you are going to write something down, it should be on your own words. You shouldn't copy anything from a book or directly copy it from a web page, since you will also have access to web. It will be, otherwise it will be aligned as a plagiarism or academic poor practice. You can definitely use your textbooks, but the wordings or text should be your own words. One question from Runmin: if we took the face-to-face seminar, will there be recording in WBS Live? And Runmin, in my particular part, you can find the recordings in the particular weeks. So if you check our workshop, study materials, our workshop, there are seminar recordings over there. And for the looks part, I think you uploaded all of the recordings in the same link. You can download it from there. One question from Arun: if we can have optimization module seminar recordings, will be really helpful. For that, I think you need to contact Vladimir, but as far as I know, they didn't record the seminars. If you have any questions on the optimization part, as I mentioned before, they are available next week. You can book an appointment and then you can discuss your questions or the areas that you haven't understand well. One question from Edwin: will I get penalized if, for that question, Edwin, whether you will get penalized on the writing by hand or no typing, it's better to ask them to the program team. They know the regulations better. Okay, thank you all. So if you have any questions, you can always contact me. I think you will go to your next lecture now. I wish you all the best. And as I mentioned, I hope you join to Christmas party and New Year party. It will be specific to your group only. It will be nice to see you there. Take care and enjoy. And good luck with your exams, but I will see you next month.